Welcome to Health and Safety Conversations. Here's your host, Tom Bourne.
Hi, and welcome to Health and Safety Conversations. I'm your host, Tom Bourne, and with me today is the marvellous Craig Salter. Craig, how are you?
I'm doing really well, Tom. Thanks for asking.
Craig, you've had an interesting career, not the conventional career that most people would venture down for safety. How did you get into safety?
Look, I think my story is probably a bit of a story by chance, to be fair. My undergrad sort of degree, I was studying exercise and sports science, and that sort of landed me a role with the Australian Institute of Sport and lecturing at the University of Canberra. I think it was at that time when I was lecturing, I started to do some work on the side, providing some support with a friend who had run a safety consulting ex-rehab business. And I think that's where I really started to find my passion. And from there, sort of the rest is history. I sort of left the academic life and the life of the institute and started sort of in my foray of health and safety.
Okay. So you've worked in a number of positions. You've worked as health and safety coordinator, health and safety manager for Coles, consultants, and now you're currently the director of Action Occupational Health and Safety Consulting. Is that keeping you busy?
The consulting part, yeah, absolutely. And with the consulting, obviously, sort of we founded Safety Champion Software. So at the moment, sort of working, I guess, across two businesses with a team of around 40 employees. So there's not really a dull moment.
Yeah, 40 employees. That must be hard to manage, I'd suggest.
Look, I think it's I think you go through stages. I sort of feel that first sort of up to sort of 10 employees, it's a really sort of enjoyable, infectious atmosphere where sort of everybody knows everybody. As you continue to grow, you need to start building out processes. You need to start sort of ensuring that you've got a management team so that they can take sort of some of the load off your shoulders and lead. So I feel from a time perspective, sort of my time's probably a little bit more manageable now than it was right at the start. But that's testament to the team that I have around me in both sort of Action OHS and Safety Champion.
Yeah, I'd suggest it is kindly vital, important to build that credible team of professionals around you so you can actually, manage the bigger picture items rather than the day-to-day operations. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I think for us, sort of our people are our business. So sort of back sort of January 2022, so sort of a bit over 12 months now, we brought on a head of people into the business. As a business of 20, or combined 20 at the time, it's probably a move that some may feel is a little bit early in the piece, but it really has supported sort of that growth over the last 12 to 15 months. It sort of ensures that our people are happy, engaged, sort of doing meaningful work and the like. So I think surrounding sort of myself with people like that, as well as sort of my management team at sort of Safety Champion and my senior consulting team over at Action OHS is super important.
Yeah. Speaking of which, the business has been around for, 11 years? 11 and a bit years?
Yep.
How'd you go? What was the main challenges you faced during COVID? Because it's been 3 years since COVID's come across our lovely shores. Was there many challenges for the business?
Yeah, look, absolutely. I think sort of for all businesses sort of through that COVID time, there was a need to reshape and sort of rethink sort of your service offerings. As a consulting business, sort of leading into COVID, or sort of not really leading, I should say, before COVID, we didn't know COVID was going to hit us. A lot of our work would have been larger projects, sort of higher billable engagements. Once we sort of started to navigate the COVID space, sort of those bigger contracts probably dried up, and we were doing more work, but smaller projects. So from a consulting side of things, it does become a little bit challenging because your administration sort of around scoping out new work, sort of project admin, project deliverables started to grow sort of in comparison to where was previously. But look, I think at that time, sort of everybody sort of was chipping in. Sort of we were really united as a business, and I can't thank sort of the staff that worked with us over that time for I guess that extra sort of mile that people went to just to ensure that sort of we were able to navigate that COVID time without having to reduce hours, without having to lay people off across the business.
Yeah. We're a bit insulated over in WA from the effects of COVID for whatever reason. We won't go there, but and some people liked it and some people didn't.
Yeah.
But the things we saw from Victoria, really interesting. A lot of emotion there. And was it a scary time for business in Victoria?
Oh, from like I said, I feel like we're one of the luckier businesses. There's plenty of clients that we were working with sort of leading up into the COVID period that haven't sort of been able to navigate the COVID journey. I think sort of when you walk down, I sort of was living in Richmond, which is sort of close to the city and sort of the offices in around sort of the city as well. And there are a number of sort of for lease signs showing up along those main streets, sort of those what were bustling business areas. So you can definitely sort of see the aftermarks. I think sort of personally, I sort of, again, that was probably sort of a challenge and something we look to embrace as a team by sort of kicking off sort of morning startup meetings so that sort of all our team were able to interact on a daily basis with familiar faces and help them sort of as a unit sort of be able to navigate sort of the challenges that COVID brought on.
Yeah, lots of remote work.
Yeah, look, we're probably, I'd sort of say, a fully remote business at the moment. We're still navigating that pathway. We still have an office, a small office, be that, but the majority of our workforce would typically work from home. And again, sort of having the right systems in place and the right people leaders within the business to ensure that people understand what the inherent requirements of their role are and what the objectives of the work they do is super important to be able to sort of navigate that space without sort of questioning the work that people are doing and what's being delivered.
Yeah, it sounds like you're the classic example of that most overused term, an agile business able to adapt to the conditions that you're presented with. Is that fairly correct?
Yeah, I think so. I think sort of we sort of, whilst we're sort of moving out of startup more into sort of scale up mode, we still adopt that startup mindset, which is being flexible and trying to sort of reduce bureaucracy within the business. I think sort of the funny part for me about COVID was that sort of one of our points of difference leading into COVID was the flexibility that we provided our workforce with regards to working from home. And I mean, as a consulting business, we compete with the top tier brokers, the top tier accounting firms. So having that sort of subtle point of difference, sort of leading into COVID, sort of provided a bit of a competitive advantage for us around attracting talent and retaining talent. Again, we need to now sort of navigate what that continues to look like moving forward to ensure that sort of we can continue to sort of build on sort of the workforce that we've created.
All right. Action OHS Consulting, what services do you provide?
Yeah, so we're a pretty generalist health and safety consulting business. You'll see our people going into businesses to audit their systems, whether that's against a standard, legislation, or providing a gap analysis, trying to sort of help businesses understand where the opportunities may lie. We build management systems for customers. We undertake a lot of secondment work. That's probably something that has grown legs through COVID, is the desire for businesses to have somebody with experience providing guidance, strategic sort of direction as to sort of where their health and safety function sort of is headed. And along with that, sort of the typical sort of probably at the moment sort of quite sort of relevant hygiene work. So whether that's dust monitoring, noise monitoring, or ergonomic assessments. So yeah, we've got a pretty diverse team, mixed experience, sort of lots of I guess opportunities for our teams to work together and collaborate to continue to build on sort of their skills that they brought into the business prior to joining us.
Good, good. Now, you're based in lovely Victoria.
Yeah.
Are you operating solely in Victoria?
No, so we have team based in all states, with the exception of Northern Territory at the moment and Tasmania. So that's through a mix of independent contractors as well as employees. But we are sort of continuing to build out our employee network across those states. But yeah, we service customers across all of Australia at the moment.
Yeah. What's the toughest advice you've ever had to give to a client?
Oh, look, I probably haven't sort of had too many situations where there's tough advice in the sense that we're sort of going sort of toe to toe in sort of verbal slanging matches. But I think sort of as a consulting business, the tough, probably sort of consistent as well, is the recognition that sort of good work doesn't mean long, sort of lengthy documents. That sort of concise, articulate, whether that's an action plan coming out of an audit that provides the business with clear direction as to what's next, or building out sort of policy and procedures that represent the work being done in a really concise format, can lead to some tough conversations. In the sense, I think sometimes people are of the opinion that sort of when you're spending money, you want a net sort of outcome, and that might be more pages, more actions, more information. And I think that's something sort of, it's, when I sort of say it's recurring, it's a fairly regular sort of conversation we're having with our customers as to what we believe we do really well.
Yeah. Speaking of clients and expectations, do clients specifically want measurable outcomes in relation to safety?
Look, I think with the work that we do with them, there's definitely measurable deliverables and sort of outcomes with sort of what they engage us for. When we are working with them, we will often sort of work with them on, and their sort of leadership team, around defining sort of what are their safety indicators, sort of whether that's objectives, targets. And that provides with a great opportunity to sort of guide them down that lead-based indicator pathway. But I think like all safety consultants, we're sort of constantly battling with the lag indicators, the LTIFRs, and so forth. And I'm not sure whether that's a safety problem or more of a business problem, in the sense that sort of whether it's the contractor engagement sort of systems that are in place, will be sort of looking for indicators like that. So that's why it becomes front of mind for our customers, not because they want it, but they need that indicator because it makes good business sense.
Yeah, particularly they need it if they're to be eligible to pick up some of the larger contracts, perhaps.
Yeah, that's correct.
It's an interesting thought, how you actually measure success in safety, because I'm yet to see a reliable way that you can actually measure safety. We look at results, but are those results actually safety, or are they just the pure luck that's occurred over time? I don't know. What's your thoughts?
Yeah, look, I think when I'd be looking to measure safety, it's not necessarily just limited to the absence of harm, but I think it's where activities that we may have historically defined as health and safety activities are being done as business as usual activities. I think that's sort of something we're also quite passionate about in that sort of simplification space, is trying to move away from the language of we're doing this because it's a safety task to we're doing this as a requirement because it makes good business sense. So I think when you're starting to look at sort of objectives and how do you measure safety, I think when people are doing it because they understand, again, the positive ramifications that it can have from an operational sort of viewpoint, not just limiting it to we're doing this because it's a safety box that we need to check. I think you can start to sort of, as a business, feel like you're heading in the right direction. There may be sort of an incident, there may be hazards that are reported, but again, this can be taken as a positive with regards to a workforce understanding sort of what the desired sort of outcomes or expectations are from the business. So you're starting to move obviously into that sort of psychologically safe sort of working environment.
True. All right, changing tack just a little. Talk to me about Safety Champion software. What does it do and why should I have it?
Yeah, look, Safety Champion software, the easiest way that I try to explain it to people is that we are to safety what my old Xero are to accounting. So I think people are quite familiar with the accounting software packages out there, and that's what your accountant uses to prompt, remind, and ensure that they can execute sort of the inherent requirements of their role. And that's what we're really trying to do with Safety Champion. The software, the software was born out of, I guess, necessity at our end. We were part of a program and still are. There's a great program for those of your audience who are based in Victoria with employees less than 60, which is the OHS Essentials program, which sort of sees WorkSafe sort of engage sort of consultants who are on their panel, which Action OHS Consulting is, to go into the workplace sort of for no charge to the customer, to provide service over 3 occasions, so a 2-hour initial, a 2-hour middle visit, and a 2-hour sort of follow-up visit, or there and thereabouts. And build out an action plan effectively. And so that over a 12-month period, the business can start to progress and start to take internal ownership of their safety program. With Safety Champion, what we sort of had recognised was that so this is back 2013, 14, we felt like we were being pretty clever with regards to how we're using spreadsheets and sort of Word documents and Outlook calendars to try to help businesses prompt them to when sort of safety initiatives or activities would come up, or how they could report incidents, hazards through sort of ways that could sort of trigger notifications. But what we would find when we would turn up for the second or the final visit would be that the spreadsheet would be stuffed, the Outlook meeting invite, somebody would have missed it or hit pause, so that would be missed. And sort of all of these good intentions that were there by the customer were just being missed by just the work that they were doing. So we're getting caught up in the operational sort of side of the business. So that's what sort of took us down the pathway to start to build out Safety Champion. We wanted to create a platform where businesses could schedule recurring safety tasks, do inspections and schedule them as required, report incidents, report hazards, send internal communications, whether that be hazard alerts or induction or pre-qualifications through to contractors, manage chemicals, sort of manage risk, sort of build out a holistic suite of modules that would be, firstly, sort of at a price point that your small and medium-sized business could be in market. Secondly, that was configurable so that your small and medium-sized business, if they had desires to build a form in a particular way, that we had code-free configuration, so that they would be able to go in there and contextualize incident hazard report forms, inspections to align with the work that they're doing, rather than getting caught with a system that they didn't have any control of, because we wanted to be there for the long haul. So that was, I guess, where we got to where we are today. We've sort of shifted a little bit. So we still service, our mission is around making safety easier and accessible for all businesses, no matter their expertise. So those small businesses will be still part of our optics, and we have built out a Go Free platform so that sort of people can sign up and access Safety Champion at no cost. But we sort of, over the last sort of 12 to 18 months, we've probably seen our median customer move sort of out of that small to medium to more that medium, sort of medium large, which is testament to the evolution of the product and the maturity of the software.
And probably evolution to the fact that it's got a good reputation, I'd suggest as well.
Yeah, and I think it's like anything in this space, right? When you've got sort of more people using it, you've got more advocates out there, um, being able to positively comment on sort of their experience with the system. And I think people like to hear from people who have positive experience as opposed to salespeople telling them why they should buy. So it's definitely something sort of we continue to harness.
Easy to use?
Yeah, look, it's yeah, obviously sort of from my side of things, bit sticking to our mission around making safety easy and accessible to all people, no matter their expertise. We place a real focus on that UI UX. We've built out sort of apps that are pretty big buttons saying if you want to report an incident, click here. Report a hazard, click here. So we don't typically have concerns from customers who are lost in the system, not able to know what they want to access or where they can access information.
Oh, that's good. And after sale, continued service?
Yeah, so with regards to that team there, so there's a sales and marketing team that's sort of pretty much sort of front end, sort of managing prospects until they sign up into the system. Marketing obviously continues with product marketing to our customers, but that's where there's a change from sales to customer success. So we'll run businesses through an implementation sort of period where we'll help them configure the system and provide them with guidance, along with obviously the associated manuals and videos and tutorials. And then we have sort of obviously ongoing account management and account support when customers get stuck, or quite typically from a safety side of things, when there's been a change in personnel. If somebody's got a 4-week leave period, they hand their resignation in, the business then goes into recruitment mode and the new person starts maybe 8 weeks later. So there's not necessarily that handover. So we've had to be quite creative in how do we onboard those people who haven't been onboarded by the original stakeholders. So it's seen us launch sort of a number of different training materials. So currently we're running boot camps, which sort of a bit of a play on the champ word rather than boot camps, but we'll run sort of free sessions for any of our users to attend to understand the system and provide them with a holistic overview to help them start moving in the right direction.
Good. All right. Regulators around Australia have been particularly active in probably the last 2 months pursuing industrial manslaughter.
Yeah.
What's your thoughts on industrial manslaughter?
Look, I think I've listened to a couple of your podcasts and some of the other guests that you've had sort of on previously, and I think sort of my views sort of probably align with those that sort of have been have made comment on it beforehand. I think from an industrial manslaughter sort of perspective, it hasn't really changed or introduced anything sort of new into the ecosystem. I think they're obviously in Victoria, sort of probably going on 2 years ago when it was, might be 2.5 years ago when it was rolled out here. There was a little bit of hysteria at the time and sort of senior management wanting to sort of really understand sort of what it meant, which I applaud. It's sort of quietened down a fair bit since then, which is no different to sort of the reactions that we had sort of when we were working with customers at the time of harmonisation, sort of along the East Coast. So I think if there's a media focus on it, sort of it does create sort of engagement from sort of the C-suite. I think if it sort of helps them sort of recognise and understand their role and their involvement sort of with safety across the business, then I think there's a positive. But I don't sort of see it fundamentally sort of changing sort of the way businesses operate, sort of if industrial manslaughter is in or isn't in.
Yeah. My current concern with it at the moment is I'm wondering if it's almost being pushed politically more than based on evidence and fact. We recently had a case permanently held in Victoria about those police officers that were hit, which, I won't comment on, but
Yeah.
it seems like where there was a rush to put the charge on, but we never came up with the evidence.
Yeah.
We've had
And look,
in Northern Territory, we've had the similar situation. We'll put industrial manslaughter about this case, and now they've had to withdraw it because, again, they don't have the evidence to support the charges.
yeah. And look, I think the challenge with legislation sort of like industrial manslaughter is it doesn't necessarily focus on all businesses out there. I think it's very much, and I don't know, I don't believe it's targeted, but it's not. It's legislation that's only going to impact the small and medium-sized businesses that are out there. I can't see sort of the C-suite at sort of an ASX listed business being sort of pursued sort of down an industrial manslaughter pathway. So, I mean, if it continues to keep those people engaged, again, I don't know if it's the prosecution that would do it, or a prosecution that would sort of cause engagement, but I think it's just their awareness that they've got a role and not really sure what that role is. I think there can be some benefits to them actively sort of proactively looking to ensure that the work that they undertake is as safe as reasonably practical.
Yeah. All right, lovely, Victoria. Only state left having occupational health and safety legislation. Okay. Are we ever likely to see our Victorian friends come over to the light or the dark side, whichever you want to say it, and adopt harmonised legislation as their own? What's your opinion?
Look, I obviously don't have any connections or any sort of insights, except for my own. But I sort of feel that as time sort of continues and as sort of within sort of states we start to deviate away from that sort of fundamental sort of one sort of piece of legislation, I see it being sort of less likely. I sort of know when sort of I was attending forums at the time of harmonisation sort of taking place, there was very, very much sort of the attitude that sort of the legislation that we have in Victoria sort of was largely the framework sort of how sort of the harmonised legislation was enacted. So I sort of say I think sort of there's still a level of support from sort of probably that sort of cohort. Like I said, as we sort of continue to be, and as the legislation continues to sort of separate out sort of across those harmonised states. And again, I think sort of in one of your earlier episodes, sort of there was the conversation about sort of there being no real discernible difference in sort of fatality rates, sort of when you look at sort of Western Australia and Victoria versus the other states. I think sort of all those types of things start to sort of add weight. And again, I think it's probably more of a political sort of piece if there was going to be a change. I think sort of there's at the moment there's obviously a lot of challenges within the economy. I think sort of trying to change a piece of legislation sort of like that just course, there would need to be sort of a real difference for that change occurring, to sort of, I guess, sort of see that support from industry associations and groups sort of based on the cost potentially of that change to businesses to adjust or change their systems. And again, it's going to be those smaller businesses that are impacted. The national companies are going to have adopted the best and worst of sort of, or I should say the best of sort of what was occurring across both or all legislations. It's those smaller sort of businesses who might be predominantly only based in Victoria where the real impact and change would be felt if we were to change the legislation, even if it was only a subtle change in spaces.
Yeah. A common theme when I teach people is, I can tell you now, people from born overseas, shall we say, cannot believe that we have different laws for different states. But alternatively, people from Australian states born in Australia tell me that there should be local differences based on local needs, and so it's
Yeah.
6 of one, half a dozen another.
Yeah. Look, I think with the legislation sort of being that sort of philosophically around sort of self-regulation, and you as a business understanding sort of the impact of the work that you're doing and how you could hurt somebody, and then you're looking to resolve and manage that. I think sort of philosophically, sort of our legislation is consistent. So it's obviously a different title on the document and maybe some different dates that sort of end, but sort of what the intention that sits behind it is consistent. So yeah, I understand sort of people maybe being challenged by sort of the variations, but I feel sort of for the large part of businesses out there and clients that we deal with, again, it's the approach to how you sort of execute your duties that's the important part, and sort of philosophically we're sort of fairly similar, and I think we use codes of practice that are somewhat interchangeably sort of between sort of states to support that.
Yeah. All right. Psychosocial hazards. Are we ever likely to eliminate them from the workplace, or is it simply a matter of controlling them like every other hazard?
Yeah, look, I mean, my approach is always, or has more recently been sort of to treat it like sort of all other hazards. I think we've come a fair way from where we were when I first came into the safety space. I think there's greater awareness and understanding. There's better conversations happening. There's systems in place. But I feel, yeah, it will be sort of something sort of like every other hazard sort of that we are sort of managing. Sort of people are always going to be sort of involved in work, and sort of where you've got people involved, there's going to be sort of the opportunity for psychosocial hazards to present.
Yeah, I agree 100%. It's only in a business where there's no people will you not have psychosocial hazards, because people clash. People have different personalities. People have different beliefs and value systems. So it's likely to happen, but it's how we manage it that makes a difference.
And I think there's that awareness that extends sort of past that, like whether it's that harassment, bullying, to we're looking at work design, we're working at workload, we're working at fatigue. There's all these other elements that I think sort of, again, even if you've got a great culture across the workplace, there are these other little sort of bits that you need to be aware of. I think every business out there has an opportunity from a psychosocial sort of risk management piece to reflect on what they're doing and how that can be enhanced.
Yeah. You mentioned the word culture. I'm curious. Lots of people have different interpretations on safety culture. What's yours?
I think for me, sort of, when I'm thinking what I would perceive as a positive safety culture, I'm looking, sort of, I'm going back to where I was sort of talking beforehand about sort of safety being part of the way that we work. Again, does that mean that there is or there isn't sort of a safety culture? I'm not sure. I haven't sort of probably given it the deep thought that maybe it requires, but I sort of feel that those businesses out there sort of that are explicitly trying to drive cultural change, again, if they're focusing sort of particularly on sort of tasks and sort of metrics, that there's something potentially missing. I sort of feel from a cultural perspective, it's just an innate way of being and sort of the climate of the workplace. So yeah, that's probably where I sit sort of in that space.
Good. All right. As a safety professional, what's the greatest challenge you faced?
Look, probably the greatest challenge, I'm probably sort of looking two parts here, sort of when I was in-house, and look, it might sort of also flow through to in the consulting space, but sort of when I was working in-house, it was probably very much around that ownership of safety. Again, as an in-house sort of safety professional, I feel that at times the expectation was that I would be doing the safety. And again, that sort of sometimes also flows through into the consulting space. But I think trying to sort of build that awareness and that understanding that the role of the safety professional in the business is to coach, is to advise, is to identify trends and provide recommendations and guidance to how the system of work can be improved, was a challenge in sort of a number of the workplaces that I was either in sort of in that internal role or where I have earlier in my consulting life played sort of a role in that secondment space.
Okay, excellent. All right, now couple of questions, and then we might finish up today, Craig. All right. Starting in sports science. Well, I have great envy because I love cricket, and I was always wanting to be good at it, but never had the ability. A bit better than John Howard, perhaps, but not much. What was it like working with the Institute of Sport and working with fast bowlers, elite fast bowlers?
Yeah, look, the AIS was my dream job. It was when I was in high school, sort of looking to work out where my career would go. It was something as simple as I was good at sport. I like science. I'll do sports science. When you get into sports science, I'd always sort of strive for what I felt was the best pathway forward, and the Institute of Sport was that in my eyes, sort of working in that space. When I was there, it was amazing. The opportunity to work with high performance teams, and that's not only the athletes, but you've got the best of the best from a sports science, sports medicine, nutrition. You're with people who are sort of cutting edge in the work that they're doing, and there's great conversations, and it's very data driven, sort of everything that you're doing. And this is sort of back 2003. I love my time there. I think sort of the challenge for me and probably what got me moving out of sport into the lecturing piece was just the workload around having to, again, today when we watch the cricket and we use Hawkeye and ball goes down and we can tell if someone's stumped, that type of work would have been a day's worth of work in us looking at sort of 250 hertz cameras, digitizing sort of where the ball was going from multiple angles and then lining them up and calibrating. And there was a lot of work to be able to get that final product. And I think for me, that's where I was challenged a lot of the time. I enjoyed the outcome, but it was the lab sort of work that really sort of strained me. But yeah, look, working sort of, I sort of followed the Australian cricket team around for a bit. So we'd work with the Australian Institute of Sport bowlers. That's been quite good in the sense that sort of a lot of those bowlers sort of came through to sort of represent Australia over the last 15 years. So sort of not necessarily being as involved now as I was then, but there was also, you'd also be able to look back and reflect on sort of, those little changes, conversations that you had, and maybe you had some form of impact on their journey.
Yeah. You must have had a favourite fast bowler you worked with. Who would that be?
Oh, look, I did my university thesis on Steve Harmison, so I'm not sure if you remember.
I remember Steve, the wild man from England, isn't he?
Yeah, he was the one that first test at the Ashes bowled it to first slip, sort of to get the series started. But look, I did some work, sort of a lot of my thesis was based on sort of how we could look at the inter-bowler variability to sort of try to determine fast bowler speed. So all of the research prior to that had been, we'll get 20 fast bowlers, we'll see what they're doing different, and that's how we'll work out how people bowl fast. Where sort of I wanted to go in with a question as to, well, if we look at that way, sort of anthropometrically, there's a lot of variation between people. So could that be the impact? So if we just look at one person and look at 20 balls that they bowl, will that give us a different indication? And we did get some statistically significant findings around run-up speed, sort of angular momentum of the bowling arm. But yeah, so he was a favourite. I think it's hard to go past Glenn McGrath, reliable, just a good human as well. That's probably where I'm positioned.
Fantastic. All right, last question. Do a lot of public speaking, and you're a member of the Australian Institute of Health and Safety. When you are speaking, what's the topic you like to speak about the most? And don't just say safety, because that's so vague.
Look, I've probably gone through a couple of different phases in my career. Early in the piece when I was not in that tech space, I really love speaking about the simplification of safety and how we can try to take away the complexity in whether it's documentations or systems to make things really simple, and trying to look at how we use language. So things like how do we hurt people, and then how can we stop people getting hurt, really resonates with a lot of the customers that we would work with. So moving away from identify the hazard and then into your risk controls. I think they felt like you were doing some science experiment there, where if we could try to really bring the language back to the stakeholders, the audience. And then more recently, and I was fortunate enough to be able to share the stage with Jay Nicholson from C2T, who's one of our safety champion clients, more recently around how technology, so software, can improve safety outcomes, and trying to guide audiences to some of the pitfalls, some of the things that they should be aware of when looking to go down the tech pathway. And a lot of that's around user system administration, inability to contextualize the system to align with your needs, pricing so that you don't get caught out on a contract that might be great year one, but then year two it aligns with market pricing, so you're looking at significant increases. So being able to share some of those stories that I've picked up on my journey, but that also resonate with me today as the founder of Safety Champion.
Fantastic. Craig Salter, thank you very much for your help today. I really do appreciate it, and I hope that some people learn from it. But for now, that's all we've got time for. But I do look forward to speaking to you again soon.
No worries, Tom. Thank you. And it was a great opportunity.
Thanks for listening to Health and Safety Conversations with Tom Bourne. Until next time, stay safe and enjoy the rest of your week.